This is the Podcast Express, and we're talking to whoever's listening out there. Welcome to 5 Minutes of Trouble, the only podcast on the internet that discusses the John Carpenter film Big Trouble in Little China 5 minutes at a time. I'm Josh Horowitz from the Wing Kong Exchange at www.wingkong.net.
Now, I'm Brett Stillo, your co-host. I'm sitting here in the passenger seat as we're rolling down Highway 99, heading towards San Francisco, or actually, we're in San Francisco. And today, Josh, we have a special guest.
Yes.
Let me tell you, he is a filmmaker. He is an actor. He is a stuntman. He is a fight choreographer extraordinaire, and he's a friend of mine. Let's welcome Dennis Ruel to the show.
Hey, thank you, Brett. Appreciate that.
Hey. Man, it's great to have you here, buddy.
Oh man, this is I'm excited about this. This talking this movie. It's hard to find people that are even half the nerd I am about talking about this movie. So, I usually am the one who's going off and saying all these things and then saying, "You don't remember that?" And people are going, "No, I don't." Well, you need to watch it again, And also, just so if anyone's listening, I apologize in advance for my voice being hoarse. I've lost it. I'm trying to find it, so it's coming back hopefully soon.
It was from a fight scene, right?
Yeah. Got punched right in the vocal cord somehow.
A Shere Khan right in the neck. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, Brett told me about Dennis a couple of weeks ago when we were trying to look into good guests for this show. And he mentioned his martial arts background, and we knew that these minutes in particular were going to be the perfect minutes for somebody with martial arts and choreography background, because this is it. This is the alley scene that you've all been waiting for. We're talking about minutes 15 through 20, and the minutes start with Egg Shen cursing in Chinese at the Pork Chop Express, and they end with a Chang Sing dealing a bunch of quick chops to a Wing Kong's face. And Dennis, you've gotten to a really good part of the movie here. We left the airport, and we've entered Chinatown, and we're about to go into the mysterious alley where all the stuff goes down.
Yeah. No, this is I love how the way that the airport scene just has that smooth transition right into this scene. And one of the things that I noticed, and I don't know, this is not even a big thing, but there's this part right when they pull in, and they're I don't know why, but Jack Burton decides to ask this woman who's out on her porch about I don't know, to get some sort of advice or help, or
Oh yeah. And the whole thing with the duck.
Yeah, the thing that gets me about that is in Enter the Dragon, when Angela Mao is running from the mob that's trying to do very bad things to her, she's running through the streets and she sees an old Asian woman just like this. I mean, it's so similar. The shots are so similar that I even, when I first saw Big Trouble, or after having seen it, I wanted to go back and look at Enter the Dragon just to make sure it wasn't the same woman. Because they honestly shoot it so similarly. I mean, even down to they have the short hair. They're wearing aprons. They're chopping. It's crazy. So
yeah, anyway. Brett, when did that movie come out? Do you know? Enter the Dragon.
Enter the Dragon was
73. Yeah, 72, 73. Yeah.
This brings up a question to both of you guys. Do you know if there's anybody who worked on both films here?
Ooh.
Oh, I don't. I should know. I'm sure some of my friends are going to punch me in the head for not knowing.
No, they'll punch you in the throat.
Or in the throat again, right? I don't. That's a great question. Now I want to go research that and do another podcast with you guys when I'm better prepared.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're going to be talking about Al Leong, Gerald Okamura. I think these guys, I don't think that they were actually in Enter the Dragon. We'll see in a little bit that some of these guys got their start in the TV series Kung Fu with David Carradine,
right?
Which was a little bit later than Enter the Dragon.
Yeah.
But
actually, I just remembered who did work with Bruce Lee. I don't know if he was on Enter the Dragon, but we can't talk about him because he's not in this 5 minutes.
Oh,
he comes up in the next 5 minutes.
Nope, we'll save it.
We'll save it. So that's the next Sorry.
Mr. Carter. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Hint, hint.
Yeah.
See, this is a lead-in for the next episode, but I think we should talk a little about the set.
Mm.
Because we see the truck going into one of the more famous areas of Chinatown, Ross Alley, where the famous Golden Gate Fortune Cookie Factory resides.
Oh.
Can't make this stuff up. Golden Gate Fortune Cookie Factory. And then it pulls into this amazing set created by Mr. John J. Lloyd that, it really does capture the flavor of a Chinatown alley, except it's like, I mean, Dennis, you've been down there, like it's 10 times the size of a Chinatown alley.
Oh yeah, the width of it, the width of every alley is. I mean, well, just fitting a big rig down there would be impossible.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, here's a question, because there's a part in the movie, like 20, 25 seconds into this 15th minute, where you get that downward angle shot that shows just how tight that alley is, the signs pushing backwards as the pork chop gets through. So, I mean, is that part of the set, or was that actually part of this alley in real Chinatown? Is it really that tight?
I would imagine, I can't speak for Ross Alley in particular, but there are probably some alleys you couldn't get that semi down. And I know what shot you're talking about, Josh, and I'm guessing, they tried. Well, yeah, I mean, they pull the truck into the alley, but maybe they couldn't get it out too well.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that overhead shot was maybe done on the Fox lot. But it might have been based on an actual experience when they were shooting up in San Francisco. We may never know, but
but then it does transition over definitely to John J. Lloyd's Chinatown backlot. The whole smoke thing going on. You get, very mysterious looking, and you get your first hint of neon. That's going to be something we're going to see quite a bit in some of the later scenes too.
Yeah, neon and fog. And I just have to say again about John Lloyd's set, with the size of it, this would equal untold millions of dollars in San Francisco real estate. You could make 10 Big Trouble in Little China sequels with the amount of real estate, if that really existed. So,
wow.
But at the 1 minute mark, we see a strange old man. Who is that old man we see?
Yes, we do. We see a mysterious man in hat and gloves holding a shoe. And it's definitely James Hong. Everybody I've talked to has said, oh, yeah, that's Lo Pan in disguise, which is a little strange. I mean, you only catch him for just a second. He has this sort of knowing smile that he gives. And just like looking at how he's, what he's dressed in. I mean, he's wearing these Western-style clothes. He's got like ragged gloves and a fedora. Is this Lo Pan in his kind of civilian clothes and he's spying on what's to come?
Yeah, I always imagined it was he's just always sort of overseeing all of the goings on in Chinatown, and I mean the storms do show up right here, and then he shows up in his other form, his ghost form. So yeah, I kind of felt like he's just sort of everywhere.
You know what? He's Lo Pan. He can do whatever he wants. He can wear whatever he wants.
He can dress however he wants, and
he probably took those clothes and that hat from an old man. He was like, I'm wearing these.
Well, if Pete Mummert were here, he would probably note that that fedora that Lo Pan's wearing. There's a possible indie tie-in.
Ooh, yeah, yeah. Dennis, we'll fill you in on Pete. He's or could it tie into editing time? Forgot the movie.
Oh,
Blade Runner. Yeah,
Blade Runner.
Yeah, Blade Runner.
That's right. The frozen fever dream of James Hong's character in Blade Runner.
Yeah, I only make ice.
Yes. Well, going on from that, because we only catch him for just a second, and then it just transitions very quickly into the funeral procession. We find out later that this is the funeral for Mr. Lem Lee, who is the boss of the Chang Sings, who was just recently assassinated by the Wing Kong. Now you can see in the procession that there's a bunch of white-robed fighting Tong. These are the Chang Sings, that Wang tells us are okay. They're the good guys.
They're the good guys.
Yeah.
Now I have a question about the funeral. You have the picture of the deceased
Hmm.
that they're carrying. Do we know who that is? I mean, is that an actor? Is that any idea who that might be in real life?
No
Ooh.
idea.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's something that I have never been able to find out. I just know that that's Lem Lee. But for all the Big Trouble fans out there, if you know this, please let us know on the Facebook page. I'm sure somebody out there might know.
I'd like to think maybe he was John Carpenter's real estate agent in Beverly Hills.
Yeah.
Some kind of a little cameo there, or, I'd love to know what, where John Carpenter's favorite Chinese restaurant is. Maybe that
Hmm.
guy owned the Chinese. I don't know. That's,
Mhm.
we're moving right along, folks.
Well, I have a couple of things actually to say about the fact that we've got our Chang Sings and our Wing Kong.
Okay.
Yeah, for Dennis, I have a copy of
Yeah.
the original first draft script of W.D. Richter's script for Big Trouble in Little China.
Wow.
And in that, it has some
That's
differences
great.
between what ended up coming to the big screen. But in the original version of the script, they weren't the Chang Sings; they were called the Sui Sings,
Huh.
is an actual fighting tong from 1880s Chinatown, and
Wow.
their enemies were not the Wing Kong but the Bing Kong, which was also a real fighting tong from the early 1900s.
Huh.
And talking about fighting tongs, because this is something that's going to come up quite a bit. Again, Mr. Mummert was able to give us some notes about the fighting tongs and Chinatown wars of the late 1800s. This actually ties into the original 1880s Goldman Weinstein script of Big Trouble in Little China. If you haven't heard this one before, the movie as it is right now, I mean, it takes place in 1980s San Francisco, but the original version of the script was supposed to be 1880s San Francisco.
Right.
It
It
was
was
a
supposed to
Western.
be Jack Burton losing his horse, right? Instead of the
Yes.
truck. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And his name was Wiley Prescott, from what I've heard in a recent
Huh.
article. Yeah.
I love that name.
But the thing about the fighting tongs, so Pete was saying that the author of the Gangs of New York novel, he ended up
Yeah.
writing about the San Francisco gang scene in this book called The Barbary Coast. And so you can learn all about these guys. There's quite a bit of history about the fighting going on between some of the tongs, such as the Sui Sings and the Bing Kong. But Pete took a walking tour of the alleys of Chinatown, and these were where historic battles did take place, like what we see here. It's pretty cool. So there's your
Wow.
little bit about the fighting tongs. Now, tell me something, Dennis. Of
Yeah.
some of the stuff that you've done martial arts wise, have you ever encountered any type of stories or type of movie stuff where they discussed fighting tongs at all?
Actually, no. Nothing that's specific. No.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I've never come across anything like that really. This is one of the few movies that, even mentions.
It would make a really good movie, I think. There's some
Uh,
untapped material.
Ooh,
So
I
fighting
can
tongs.
take you guys back about over 80 years to an awesome movie made in the early 30s about Tong Wars,
Oh.
called The Hatchet Man.
the
Pretty
hatchet.
cool movies.
Hmm.
It was, pre-code Hollywood. It does have the problem of, American actors playing all the Chinese roles, so you have to get
Hmm.
used to Edward G. Robinson as a Chinese hitman. But
Oh wow.
it's a pretty cool movie though, because it's all about Tong gang wars.
Oh
Wow.
wow.
So he's in
Okay.
makeup, which is typical for that era. But it's a pretty cool movie, and it does get into the Tong Wars. It's definitely exploitative,
Hmm.
but you get a sense, even with Big Trouble in Little China and what you were mentioning about the script. There is a foundation of truth
Mm-hmm.
to it. So, but
Hmm.
I have a feeling overall, if what goes on in the Tong stays in the Tong. That's why you've never heard about any Tong trials. No, there were no Tong.
That's why. Yeah.
We're not getting into it.
It's been swept under the rug. Who knows?
Yep.
Now, for those of you guys who are just dying to know what is actually being said on the banner that the Chang Sings are holding up next to the big picture of Lemley. I was able to just do a Google Translate. I just took a picture of the scene on my phone, and it seems to say, "Generation of leaders will last forever."
Huh.
That's appropriate.
Until the next 30 seconds.
That's right.
There's definitely a generation of leaders in this valley who will not last forever, but I don't want to get too ahead of myself.
Yep, because things are just about to change because we get our first appearance of the first actor that,
Oh, yeah.
he's somewhat of a big legend in here, and that is Wing Kong, played by Al Leong.
The legendary Al Leong, the one and only Al Leong.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Man with the meanest mustache in Hollywood, if you ask me.
Easily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Al Leong was just what's an 80s action movie without Al Leong?
Yeah, no, that's true. I think probably after watching this film as a kid, when I would see movies later, he was probably one of the main characters where I recognized him as one of the bad guys in later films. Like, oh yeah, that's that guy from Big Trouble in Little China, because he has a very distinct look. It's always him with that mustache, and he's usually playing a bad guy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And when you see him here and he comes out of the fog, I mean, he's played bad guys before, but he looks seriously upset here. He's having a bad because he just looks like, don't look at me. Are you making fun of my mustache?
Well, sure. Well, sure, he's mad. He wasn't invited to the funeral.
Oh, true. And he's got the cleavers, and he just means business.
Yeah, he has the smallest weapon. It's all he could find. Everybody else got guns and machetes.
Yeah, actually, interesting thing. I mean, you were mentioning before, Brett, about that Edward G. Robinson, film talking about the Hatchet Man. Well, that's the name of this character according to the script. He is a Wing Kong Hatchet Man.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Leong's character. But I did a little bit of background research on this guy. Some trivia. Albert Leong is also known as Al Kabong. That's his nickname. His martial arts skills include Northern Shaolin Kung Fu, Taekwondo, Kali, and Jiu-Jitsu. And apparently he's a former Beverly Hills Pro-Am Karate Soft Forms champion. Now, Dennis, I'm sure you've probably heard of all of these things. Kali, I've never heard of. Are you familiar with these different?
Yeah, Kali is a Filipino martial art. It's they usually specialize in stick fighting.
Mm-hmm.
The different forms of eskrima. They have stick and knife fighting, and I mean, a lot of these guys in this scene right here are sort of practitioners of various martial arts.
As a stuntman and actor, he has a long list of credits, including Lethal Weapon. He played Endo, the guy with the, I guess that was like a torture device, something, a shock therapy, right? He was also Uli, the chocolate bar eating terrorist in Die Hard. He was also in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. He played Genghis Khan.
Yes.
And then he was a henchman in the Brandon Lee film Rapid Fire.
Yeah. When my friends and I saw Al Leong in Rapid Fire, I personally we were all kind of pumped that he got pushed forward a little bit in that film, that he was given a little bit more screen time, and he was given pretty much the epic final fight in that movie. Because in all the films that you see him in, while he has that, as you said earlier, that very distinctive look, and he's always given, cool screen time and everything. It's cool to see him in a role where he's the right hand man to the villain, and he's given that kind of shine,
Yeah.
So
that's a good point, because we mentioned, Die Hard. I don't think he even throws a punch in Die Hard. He looks menacing, and he's got a submachine gun, but
right.
And a chocolate bar.
And a chocolate bar. A lethal chocolate bar. yeah, we don't really get to see Al Leong do what he does best, and that's fight. So
Hmm. There's actually a documentary being developed about him. It's called Henchman, the Al Leong story.
henchman,
Hmm.
I want to see that.
I think that should be coming out, if not this year, then next year.
That's
Yeah,
gonna be cool.
neat things. But yeah, so there's Al Leong. The sort of the other thing I wanted to mention here is that we see these Wing Kong approach out of the shadows with meat cleavers. I mean, this is very Gangs of New York style.
Yeah.
You kind of get a sense that this could be any time. Just by the costumes that they're wearing and the smoke
Yeah.
and the atmosphere, this could very well be 1880s Chinatown. Really, it's not until you see one of the Wing Kongs appear with an AK-47 that you realize that, oh yeah, this is taking place during modern times.
Which brings us to another character. You mentioned the timelessness, and we see
Hmm.
another legend, Gerald Okamura. He shows up, and yeah, he's got his 6 guns and his bandoleros.
Hmm.
I imagine his character is left over from that original 1880s script. He looks like a Chinese gunslinger.
Yeah, he does look like that. I had a chance to do an email interview with him back in 2011 for the Wing Kong Exchange, and so he gave me a little bit of insight onto why his costume is like that and why he's got those guns. But he was actually born in Hilo, Hawaii, and his martial art was judo. He started that at the age of 13. And then he went to a kung fu school in El Monte, California, and Gerald was able to become a 5th degree black belt. He later got into acting with a role on the Kung Fu series with David Carradine. Since then, he's been in dozens of other films, including The Shadow, Hot Shots Part 2, and even the recent G.I. Joe movie. The thing that he was talking about when I had my interview was that he's actually a designer of many custom weapons. And there's one weapon that he had, it's called the Okamura hook sword.
Huh.
It's ironic that he's actually not featured with swords, considering that he's all into these type of custom weapons, but instead he has these 2 gold-plated 6-shooters. And in the interview, Gerald mentioned that it was John Carpenter himself who personally chose those weapons for him. He went to him and he's like, okay, you, Gerald, this is your costume. You've got to have, these weapons, these guns, and these really big bullets that were across. So he has these rifle bandoleros, even though his guns couldn't actually fit that ammo, just so he can look kind of menacing.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. I gotta wonder. There are a lot of exotic weapons in this sequence, especially actually in the next 5 minutes. I wonder if some of those might have been designed by Mr. Okamura.
I always thought it was great the way that he did his whole martial arts sort of breathing exhale before he shoots the guns here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like as if he were going to draw 2 weapons and start fighting, but yet he's pulling out the 6-shooters.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought that was so weird and so cool at the same time.
Yeah.
Like I said before, just like everything else in this movie, everything is so weird and so cool that I accept it all.
Mm-hmm.
Like why this guy would do this big martial arts breathing out before drawing these guns, and just the whole thing, why he's wearing those things. And it's cool to hear you guys talk about the old or the original idea for the film being in the 1800s,
mm-hmm.
and how this was probably a carryover.
Yeah, Brett, do you like how Jack pulls out his knife during all this?
Oh yeah,
I love that. That's my favorite bit in that whole scene.
He sees all this stuff, so he just, he rolls up his window just before the gun goes off, and then he pulls out his knife.
Nice.
Yeah. We can't forget about Jack and how Kurt Russell is really doing a great job of being scared
Mm-hmm.
and trying not to look scared, but definitely scared. And he's holding that knife like it's a pacifier. You almost picture him wanting to suck his thumb. And yeah. And just, the fact that he and Wang are surrounded. They're kind of, they're safe in the truck, but they're also trapped in the truck.
That's right.
But, you mentioned Gerald Okamura and the breathing and everything. It's interesting that this all happens very fast. From here on out, lots of quick cutting. But, you're kind of expecting him to draw, but it's some punk Wing Kong guy with an old-fashioned Tommy gun.
That's right. Yeah, very classic gangster style.
Yeah, yeah. And, you wonder if he got in trouble later. It's like, hey, I'm supposed to shoot. What's up with the Tommy gun stealing my thunder? And then, yeah, kind of like what you mentioned, Dennis, it's such a hodgepodge of style and influences because you've got all these crazy different guns. Yeah, you've got a Tommy gun from the 1920s going off. You've got AK-47s. And a little before that, you see that close-up, a gun suddenly comes into frame that blocks Jack's truck, and it's an old, British Webley revolver. This kind of, these different weapons and everything, it reminds me of another Carpenter film, Assault on Precinct 13. That was a low budget movie, and they really couldn't afford fancy guns. So it was kind of like whatever they could find, like they went to, bargain basement prop warehouses and just like, what can we get for this much money? Yeah, it's over there in the junk box.
Speaking of the weapons, I actually have a list of all the weapons that we see during this sequence. The Wing Kong fight with meat cleavers, machetes, metal poles, short swords, wooden sticks, a wooden plank, knives, AK-47s, a revolver, 2 golden 6-shooters, a Thompson submachine gun, and an axe. And then when you get to the Chang Sings, they have an Uzi, an automatic pistol, submachine guns, metal poles from the casket, and swords, and Jack Burton has his knife.
Huh. They didn't mention that the Wing Kong have some 2x4s.
Oh, yeah. The wooden planks. Yeah, sure.
Okay. The wooden planks. Okay, I missed it. That's funny.
Yeah. So there.
I always thought that was funny because you have all these weapons and you got a couple guys with a couple pieces of wood. It's great.
Yeah.
That's what you get when you arrive to the meeting late.
Yeah.
They just give you the 2x4.
No.
Yeah, just pick up that piece of wood over there.
Don't be late time.
But yeah, with all these weapons going off, that's when you get to hear some of Alan Howarth's weapon sound effects. The Ben Burt of this movie is Alan Howarth, who did the sound design. And there's some really neat gunshots and ricochets and all sorts of stuff going on here.
Yeah. Just to step back, I mean, Carpenter has a great moment when the two armies charge. You feel like you're in like an Italian swords and sandals epic. It's just like it's in this small alley. It's really not a lot of guys, but he makes it seem big when you have Chang Sing and Wing Kong racing towards each other. And of course, you see a scene when they collide, but they also kind of pass each other. And then it's fights on.
Yeah. One other thing I noticed is that, despite all the violence that's going around, all these shots that happen, just prior to the charge, notice that the Pork Chop Express isn't even touched once.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, just when they were shooting, you'd imagine it to have all types of bullet holes, at least in the front.
Yeah. I did have a chance to take a look at the screenplay, and in the screenplay, it does mention that a bullet smashes through the windshield between Jack and Wang, and then a hatchet smashes the driver's side window, and fighters end up bouncing off the hood and roof of the Pork Chop Express.
Oh, wow.
So
that would be cool.
They were intending it to be something where they were really involved, but I guess, there's no blood, there's no bullet holes or anything like that. It almost has a very surreal, kind of timeless quality to it all.
It adds to the feeling of, this is, in some ways, it's a big cartoon. It's not, the fighting. Dennis, I think you were alluding to this. It's a movie fight. Everything's broad. Everything's exaggerated. And so you get, kind of old fashioned, nobody. Well, I'm thinking in particular, there's a scene where, Al Leong slices up a guy. He goes slash, slash, slash. And you don't see a drop of blood on that guy.
Right.
It's implied, but it's. I think and again, I think you hear a great Alan Howarth sound effect. But it's a violent fight, but it's a bloodless fight. I love movie fights. This is a movie fight.
But if we look at it in order of the minutes, though, even before they do that charge, there's some really cool stuff that happens. The shooting stops, we get silence, and then the Chang Sing, they jump out, they're all angry, And then you get that John Carpenter music that just matches the tension. You get that dramatic drum thing, doom, 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 going on. You get our Chang Sing hand signs. That's sort of
Yes.
the first instance of that. I mean, that's something where, it's funny. Even now, if I ever talk to somebody who's seen Big Trouble in Little China, I can just do that type of sign, and they kind of know exactly what I'm talking about. That's almost like a little secret handshake for people who know the film.
Oh yeah, my friends and I still exchange that thing.
Nice.
So Dennis, is
Yeah.
that an actual thing in martial arts? Is that something they made up for the movie?
Oh, I imagine it's something for the movie. It could very well be from something, but I'm not familiar if it is from like a specific style or something. I'm not sure.
Or like, for example, you haven't seen it in other, earlier Hong Kong martial arts movies.
Well, I mean, that particular hand position has been around. I mean, forever. I mean, like when dudes are doing certain kung fu styles and stuff. I mean, you'll see Jackie Chan do that in Drunken Master 2, and you'll see not necessarily as a gesture, as some sort of signal to your buddy, but just a certain, it's just a pose, a ready pose,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's cool is that this is the first time I've seen that certain position used as you mentioned, like kind of like a hey, how you doing kind of a thing,
Mm-hmm.
because later on in the film when they're drinking the six demon bag, and they all get into the elevator and they're going up, and how's everybody feeling, and then one of them actually gives that sign to another guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going, wow, even when they're not in a fight, they're just kind of like, they're just throwing it up there, kind of like a hang loose, like a Hawaiian hang loose.
Yeah.
And I just love that they took that from old martial arts styles, and they're using it as a gesture. I think it's great.
Even at the end of the film, I mean, it's really jumping ahead, but we will see even Jack Burton gives that sign to Wang at the end. I mean,
they give it back and forth when they're leaving at the restaurant. Yeah. It's great. It's great.
But moving on from there, after they clear the alley, then Wang mentions a Chinese standoff.
Yeah.
So is that a thing? Is that any different than a Mexican standoff, or was that just something they came up with for this?
I imagine it's something they came up with too. That always cracked me up as a kid, because I was thinking to myself, really, are the Chinese the only ones that stand off this way? I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of gang wars that start like this. I don't know. I don't know what makes it Chinese, but sure, why not?
Yeah.
Again, I just accept all these things in this movie. They're weird and cool at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, the alley is where the movie, we are crossing a border into the fantastic. I mentioned it, the cartooniness, and yeah, I mean, prior to the alley, we're kind of based in some reality. It gets a little weird at the airport, but really once we cross into the alley, that's in a sense when the movie begins, and it's just kind of totally manic from here on out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wanted to, before we get into the fight proper, I just wanted to mention Mr. James Liu. We actually get a chance to see James Liu. He's the one who's leading sort of the procession. And yes, he plays Chang Sing #1. He was the associate producer and martial arts choreographer for the film. And according to IMDb, it says that, like Gerald Nakamura, he also got his start on the TV series Kung Fu. And he was known for doing stunts on films more recently as Inception, Pirates of the Caribbean, and The Last Samurai. Though he did get a chance to work with John Carpenter again on Escape from L.A. And here's a note that I got from the press kit for Big Trouble in Little China. So he worked on the film with some of the other Chang Sings who were holding the coffin. So martial arts consultant Jim Lau was one of them, and stunt coordinator Kenny Endoso. And according to the press kit, it says that this movie was the first time in any American-made movie that all the martial arts posts were filled by Chinese Americans. So that was a first there. So
That's
yep.
cool.
So yeah, James Liu.
Very
Dennis,
cool.
you just worked with him just a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
So he's still in the business.
And a really, really fun, hilarious guy to hang around. And like I quote lines from James Liu, I mean, I have ever since I was a kid, like, I always used to say, man, who is this guy?
Yeah.
I mean, because if I ever find myself in a situation where somebody says something sort of off, I throw that line out there and nobody knows what I'm talking about, but it's fine.
It's nice to know that you could meet a Wing Kong member. And yeah.
Yes.
Nice guy.
Yeah.
So that brings us up to the fight itself.
Yes.
Now it starts with the charge. You were talking about that a little bit earlier, Brett. Have you ever seen the Kurosawa film Ran?
Not in a long time, but did Ron come out before Big Trouble?
I'm not sure. It was around that same time. I just remember reading somewhere or being told at one point that the charge scene we see was inspired by Ron.
Yeah, I mean,
Ron.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm not familiar. I'm not familiar with Ron exactly, but it was 85.
Okay, so it would have been before.
So,
yeah,
right before.
So I wonder if Carpenter was inspired by some of the charging scenes in that one. I mean, that's a movie that has, I guess that was like feudal Japan, and you had these massive armies just kind of running at each other during some of the more epic scenes.
Yeah, and like I said, yeah, I know. I get excited. It's Hollywood movie fights, but yeah, you can see where Carpenter did it on a smaller scale, but it's equally as exciting. He probably had, I'm guessing, maybe 50 guys in a relatively small alley set, yet you feel that energy as they're coming towards each other.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the editing during this whole sequence is just awesome. I mean, it's quick cuts, it keeps things moving, just awesome stuff.
Nice whip pans that kind of go with the blow hitting somebody, and it's just bam, bam, bam.
And I always like the fact that there's a good combination of weapons fighting as well as traditional martial arts during this sequence.
Yeah. And then we get to, my favorite bit, the board. Why does the one member of Wing Kong have the board?
So he can break it across somebody's neck.
Yeah. It's just like, that's, it's like that board has writing on it, to be used only to break across the back of somebody's head.
Oh.
But it ends up being his own. The guy runs with the board, and the guy grabs it, pulls his own board behind his neck, and knees him in the face right through the board.
That's right. Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Again, that's what you get when you come late to the meeting.
That's right.
You get the board, and then your own weapon is used against you.
Yeah. It was his own.
I mean, there's some pretty violent moments that happen during this fight sequence. I mean, in addition to the board breaking across the neck, I mean, there's sword stabbing, there's that broken arm that happens. I mean, there's no blood in any of this. I mean, yeah, it's going back to the whole sort of cartoony nature to it. But I did read that many of these sort of violent scenes, they were edited out of the German release, unsurprisingly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting.
Wow.
Because yeah, like you said, it's very violent, but it's also very clean. It is like a cartoon. I mean, even when you do see a guy, I think a guy's leg twists in one direction and another guy's arm twists in another direction. It's so fast. It's got a slightly comic element to it. Wouldn't you say, Dennis?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
the whole movie.
We little aside here, but we did a movie a couple of years ago called Sensitive 70s Turtleneck Tough Guys. And, Dennis, you were the fight choreographer and first cameraman on the fight scenes, and yeah, we had some fun rubber limbs for those fight scenes. Yeah, we bent them this way, we bent them that way. We like Stretch Armstrong. So
yeah, the director, our buddy Jose Montesinos, he had some great ideas for what to do with the limb once it was broken too. So yeah, you'll just have to check that out someday.
Perhaps we will supply a link to go to the podcast. So yeah, and you can see you can see some great handheld camera work by Mr. Dennis Ruel.
Mhm.
He's a human Steadicam.
Going back to the action, when you get that instance where the broken arm happens, I just remember when I saw that I was like, whoa, and then sure enough, at that moment, or right afterwards, we get a reaction shot, reminding us that Jack and Wang are still there in the Pork Chop Express, and
Yeah,
they're in the middle of all of this, and they're like, whoa, also,
yeah. It adds to the surreal and comical effect that these guys. You mentioned in the script how the Pork Chop Express took damage. But yeah, it's unscathed. It's like these guys don't even notice. They're just so intent on wiping out their enemies. It's like, oh yeah, and there's a truck on the way. Like they could care less.
yeah, they're totally oblivious
Yeah.
to the fact that the Pork Chop Express is there. They're just doing their thing, doing their fight.
And now that one guy from the Wing Kong looked right at Dennis Dunn when they were walking by the truck, and he just saw him in the truck, and he just said, "Whatever, I'm here for these guys, not you."
Yeah, that's right. Going back, yeah, there is some
Yeah.
eye contact, but it just sort of,
Yeah,
maybe
they don't care.
it's
Yeah.
like I said, it's a good Hollywood movie fight. They got more
Yep.
things
Yep.
on their mind. One thing I noticed watching it is towards the end, you do have a nifty little confrontation between Al Leong and I think it's James Liu, and they really go at it. And this is where Al gets the better of him and throws him through the window.
Yep.
But yeah, they do have arguably perhaps the two best fighters on the set. And yeah, they get into it. They trade blows, and it ends up with James Liu going through the window.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, at that point, we're basically near the end of these 5 minutes. It ends with the Chang Sing. Jim Lau is the actor there doing those rabbit punches. That's kind of a cool little bit there. I mean, that ends our 5 minutes, but there's still more fighting going on in the next probably minute and a half.
Oh yeah, with the storms.
Yep. Well, that's coming.
What are you talking about? I've never seen this movie before.
I don't know. I just had a feeling.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I do feel like I have to mention that the scene does end. The very last thing we see is James Liu coming back out through the window.
Yeah, that's right.
So some great candy
Jump on
clubs
another
there.
dude. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
But yeah, that ends it. Can you believe that we got through all that fight in those 5 minutes?
God, I could
Yeah.
talk for another half an hour about it. But it's great stuff. It's great stuff.
Yeah.
And Dennis, this movie, when you how old were you? Do you think when you saw this movie?
It's funny when you first asked if I could jump on with you guys. I started thinking about that, and I cannot figure it out. I have no idea because, I mean, I think I watched this thing several times a year ever since I first saw it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I mean, it's really hard to tell. I don't know. I mean, it must have been not. Oh man, I don't know. Really tough.
Well, would you say this was the movie that maybe lit the fire? Were you doing martial arts?
This is no, not yet, but this absolutely is responsible for the fire being lit.
Wow.
Along with some Hong Kong action films that were coming out at around the same time that I did not see until a few years later. So my exposure to martial arts films, included, Big Trouble in Little China and some action B movies from America at around this time. Big Trouble is just in a class by itself for me personally because of the mix of the fantasy and the comedy and the whole fish out of water theme.
Right.
I mean, I think everything about Big Trouble is kind of what made me want to make films that way, because I want to make very fun action films. I tend to sort of lean towards fish out of water stories, Yeah.
Speaking of action movies with a comedic touch and colorful casts, it kind of reminds me of a movie that you made called Unlucky Stars, a feature-length action motion picture that you made on a wing and a prayer. I know this. I was there for part of it, and
yes, Brett was in it, and Brett also helped with the writing of a film within the film.
Oh, very good.
Tell our excited audience about just a little bit about Unlucky Stars.
Well, Unlucky Stars is my first film, and it was definitely a passion project, meaning that we had just an incredible no budget, and we a group of a big group of stunt people and actors and close friends all kind of came together to make this thing. Is really a super group effort, indie film, and the whole goal of the film was to make a fun martial art action movie, a comedy that would be something that gave a lot of shine to a lot of different people, a lot of different martial arts styles, a lot of different stories, because I wanted to have different stories, different paths cross and everything. And again, one of my biggest influences is Big Trouble. To have a big martial art action movie that just kind of makes you smile from the beginning to the end, and something that you think back to and you go, man, that was a lot of fun. I'd be willing to just throw that on any day. That's how I felt about Big Trouble.
Well, we'll definitely have to put that up on our page, with the Unlucky Stars, which actually just brings me to some of the plugs that we have for this one. Make sure that you all visit us at 5minutesoftrouble.com. We also have a Facebook page, 5 Minutes of Trouble. We have a Twitter feed at 5 Minutes Trouble. We've also just created a new discussion group. So if you want to talk about this podcast or Big Trouble in Little China in general, you can go to 5 Minutes of Trouble Truck Stop. And I want to also tell everybody out there in podcast land, if you could please tell your friends about this podcast and give us a nice rating on iTunes, we'd really appreciate it. And
or else we'll tell the Wing Kong.
We'll get Ali on to come find you in an alley.
Yeah, that's right.
You don't want Ali Ong staring at you.
Well, Dennis, I wanted to thank you very much for coming on to this podcast.
Thank you, guys. Thank you guys so much.
You brought some really neat insights, a lot of stuff with some of your stunt work, and definitely going to have to check out some of the work that you've done. That's great.
Thank you, guys. This was really an honor for me. I'm always excited to talk about this movie. I'm sure you guys can tell. Sorry that my voice is all messed up for this whole thing.
That's okay. Yeah, definitely. Thanks for being on the show. It has been a blast, my friend.
Yes, thank you very much. And so I think that's going to wrap it up for this week. This is the Podcast Express signing off. Tune in next week for another 5 Minutes of Trouble.